Welcome to the Light Reading Executive Spotlight Q&A. This is Light Reading's sponsored podcast series where we explore some of the people and technologies that are moving the industry forward. My name is Phil Harvey. I'm an editor here at Light Reading, and today I'm joined by Geert Heyninck. He leads the Broadband business unit at Nokia, and he's been in the industry more than 25 years, so he's seen a broad range of technology changes in the broadband access arena. Geert, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Phil. Well, I'm very glad that I can join this podcast.
Happy to have you. And it's great, too, because our main topic of discussion is broadband and fiber. And to set the scene, I think maybe we should start from a pretty high level view. In your opinion, what's the most, or what are some of the most compelling reasons for needing fiber broadband upgrades today? And then secondarily, do you think that GPON is up to the task?
Well, if you look at operators, they historically look at the bandwidth from an average perspective. And this was correct in the past, but things have changed and people are starting to look at bandwidth from a different matter. So what is starting to count more and more nowadays is peak bandwidth. Bell Labs has done some research, and they basically compared, let's say, the average bandwidth that you do with snapshots of 5-10 minutes or whatever sort of interval you're measuring, and you looked at it at the 1 second interval. What turns out is that you see a lot of frequent short-lived peaks. And this is fundamentally a difference in nature of the traffic. And obviously, if you build a network which addresses those peaks in a very efficient way, this is obviously going to be much more satisfying for the end consumer. So let me give you a couple of examples as to why we see this change. Let's assume your son is a gamer or whomever it is, and he's dying to download some games. Now, the size of a game is around 150, 300 megabytes. So if you have a 1 gigabit connection, the download of this game lasts between 30 minutes and 1 hour. This is huge. This is humongous. So if you now think about a new speed like 20 gigabit per second, you do this in a few minutes. So the amount of satisfaction from an end customer's perspective is enormous between those two, but it's a short-lived peak. Let me give another example. So we are here on Teams, and you can use Microsoft Office. Now, when you start using Microsoft Office, you are accessing files which are run in the cloud. So normally you do it on your PC. Now you run it in the cloud. You really want to have the same experience, whether you download or upload those files, as if it were on your hard disk. So here we are talking about 6-7 gigabit per second. So again, you want to have that peak speed available readily at your fingertips. If you look at it on the other side, humans have become much more impatient. There has been a study of Forbes who is basically looking as into what is the span of attention of a human. Over the last 25 years, it reduced with 50%. So we are now lower than a goldfish. So you can imagine. So basically, look, getting those high speeds and accommodating those new traffic patterns, that's really what is driving multi-gigabit PON technologies into the networks. And today, there are over 100 networks which are basically already deploying in this fashion.
Yeah, that's a great summary for why the need is so urgent, and I like too that you add in the human consideration, because that's true. Part of the reason things seem slow is because we're a lot less patient, and we have kind of businesses and entertainment built on that fact. Can you tell us? Okay, so we definitely know the need is real. Can you tell us a bit about Nokia's strategy for delivering the next generation PON evolution as we now see that there's such a need for this?
Well, as Nokia, we are deploying in over 400 networks. So we're doing fiber deployment in over 400 networks. So we have a bit of experience here. And what we did learn out of this is operators are all different. They have a different topology, they have different user demands, they have a different competitive landscape, and you need to provide the right technology for each of those different factors. And as Nokia, we are very proud that we are basically not skipping a single step of technology. So we are investing in 10 gig, 25 gig, 50 gig, 100 gig. This allows the operator to select whatever is best for him. It's not up to me to decide for him. He can make the right choice. Now, if I look at our customer base, we have over 20 customers who are complementing their XGS network with 25 gig PON as one of the examples. We have customers who are approaching us and say, well, 25 gig PON, we are going to skip it and we're going to go directly for 50 gig PON. And there are customers who believe that, well, we have plenty of bandwidth nowadays. Let's wait until 2030 before we upgrade. And they are considering directly to move to 100 gig PON. Point being, not one single customer is the same. They all make their own choices. Now, sometimes people say, yeah, but there is going to be an ecosystem, there's going to be a region, there's going to be a single operator who is driving a certain demand or a certain technology. Well, frankly speaking, history says something else. If you look at, for instance, at the China market, which is quite commonly being said, this is going to drive whatever the future is going to be. Well, they invested and they selected XG-PON1 a while ago. Guess what? The rest of the world did XGS-PON. If you look at the cable operators in North America, they selected EPON. Nowadays, they are actively looking at XGS-PON and they are for sure looking at 25 gig PON. So again, they are no single markets. They are all very different. And the fact that we can offer the full range to our customers for them to select what is best for them, that's really what makes us strong.
Yeah, that's a great point. Operators are all different. And then when you look at, we talk about the telecom industry and sort of the common challenges that they have. But like you were saying, when you look at their individual networks, they come from different places. They're, some of them are built by series of mergers and acquisitions. And then you've got all the regional variations, like you were pointing out, not just within countries, but also the landscape and things like that. So there's all kinds of reasons why operators will be at different places in the technological evolution. But like you mentioned, Nokia is not skipping a single step of that technology evolution. They're investing in all the steps. So I think that's something that operators need to keep in mind. While we're talking about operators, what are the main factors that they have when they're considering the technology options for upgrading to, for making fiber broadband upgrades?
Yeah, and as usual, the choice is not really about technology. It's really about the business case. So if an operator looks at his business case, there are a couple of considerations he needs to make, right? Is there a real demand for the higher speed? What is going to be my take rate? And hence, will it be driving some additional revenue? The other aspect, obviously, is what is the cost of the technology in order to meet that demand? So if you look at it from a distance, if you have speeds up till 8 gigabit per second, XGS-PON is obviously the right path forward. This is something which is done by a lot of operators, and it's also the most dominant technology out there in North America. If you really want a true symmetrical 10 gig service, actually today there's only one technology out there, which is 25 gig, and it's very efficient for this sort of application, and it allows you to drive an awful lot of new revenue. If you want to go beyond 20 gig, 50 gig PON is the natural next step. And each of them come with their own price tag. I mean, it's logical. XGS is cheaper than 25, 25 is cheaper than 50. That's the way it works. They also come with different maturity levels. So if you look at XGS-PON, it's something we introduced sort of 10 years ago. 25 gig PON we introduced 5 years ago. 50 gig PON is actually coming to market this year, and we are sort of building as an industry the ecosystem to make sure that this is going to be successful. Maybe a last consideration around this is it will also depend on the competitive position. We have a customer in Hong Kong who is driving a massive rollout of 25 gig PON to really get their customers on board, preempting a potential 50 gig PON deployment from competition. So they wanted to make sure that they are occupying the market rapidly, and that's something they can do easily with 25 gig PON, rather than waiting and see and simply go on the bandwidth wagon. So because, okay, let's face it, 25 gig PON has quite some leeway and some room in order to offer differentiated services.
Great information here to kind of lay it out. It's like, so it's definitely not just one factor. And like you said, every operator will come at it from a different point, but they've got to think about the business case. They've got to think about the trade-off possibly between buying the latest technology and then the availability of the gear, or sort of how used to it the industry is. And then, of course, you've got operating cost and competitive considerations. So there's quite a few things that go into it, not just speeds and feeds, that the customer generally sees. So I guess the next logical question then is, what are some of the use cases for 10, 25, and 50 gig PON?
Well, we are already deploying fiber broadband for over 15 years, and we are basically deploying it for residential consumers services. But when you lay down the fiber, you basically pass each and every street, each and every corner, you come everywhere. And there are an awful lot of connectivity, potential connectivity that you can provide on those locations. So you can think about smart cities where you sort of attaching traffic cameras. You can think about enterprises which are there. You can think about a small cell backhaul or even a large mobile site backhaul. So there are a lot of other additional opportunities that you can seize when you are deploying fiber because the bandwidth has increased in a significant way. So if you look at it from a high-level perspective, from a residential play, XGS-PON and 25 gig PON are basically the best fit. And so they are mature technologies, they have a cost-effective solution, they are able to serve a high-volume, price-sensitive market. In fact, some of our 25 gig PON customers to date are deploying 25 gig PON for residential market. Name two of them, Google Fiber, Hong Kong Broadband. They are really focusing on a residential offering. And for that purpose, we have developed a couple of ONTs, just to make sure that we are fit for the residential service at scale. If you look at the enterprise side, any of the other technologies I was talking about does fit. So we have the example, for instance, on 25 gig PON in New Zealand, where we connected a cherry farm towards the network, towards a cloud-based network. So as the cherries pass by, we take a whole set of high-definition photos. This is going towards an AI engine, and then the cherries are sorted in the right basket. This was a major improvement on productivity because from 50,000 cherries per year, they can go now to 150 million, from 50 million to 150 million cherries. So that's a huge improvement. We also expect moving forward, there will be a need for higher capacity, above 20 gigabit per second, so where 50 gig would fit. And you can think about some real-time AI-driven diagnostics with a huge amount of transfer of very high-quality images in large volumes. So each and every technology will fit a specific need.
That's a great point, especially, kind of contrasting the consumer needs, for high volume and lower cost with the enterprise needs, which are, like you said, could be satisfied by some of the consumer technology, but also maybe needs more advanced applications. The farming one is the farm thing you brought up was an interesting example because there is a lot of within farms. There's a lot of sort of islands of connectivity. And in the agriculture business, there's a great push to kind of be, I don't remember the term exactly, but it's very much like you were describing. It's agriculture considerations down to the individual plant using, or the individual crop using high def cameras and high speed connectivity. And it's quite fascinating. We've written about it before on Light Reading, so I'd encourage readers to go back and maybe search rural farming or something like that on Light Reading, because it's definitely a data intensive process, and it's something that I think will help us rethink connectivity to rural areas and farmlands all over the place. This brings me to my last question, and I do want to respect your time, and thanks for sharing it with us today. We get to kind of think about where we're going next. How do you see the fiber broadband market developing in the next 5 years?
Well, I definitely see a couple of trends, right? So the first trend, I have been talking about residential market, and that was the first entry. And we suddenly see the broadband fiber being used for enterprise, mobile backhaul, smart cities. And that's a concept that we call basically fiber for everything. So fiber from the residential becomes fiber for everything, whatever you do. And this is possible because a couple of things. First of all, the speed, right? So the speed has increased from 10, 25, 50, 100. So there's plenty of bandwidth. But speed is not enough for those applications. So you need things like low latency. You need to have ultra high reliability. So actually we have products coming out with 6 nines, not even 5 nines, 6 nines. It needs to be green because obviously we want to preserve the ecosystem, and you need to come with an AI-enabled automation. And these are exactly all the features that we are implementing in our solutions. The second trend that I see is 25 gig will be deployed more and more for residential services. So I already explained that you need the multi-gigabit peak speed. And this is where 25 gig is really an attractive point because you have an attractive cost point. It is a viable business case now for residential services, and it is providing more gratification, more satisfaction for the consumer market. On top of that, for our networks, for the cards that we are selling, those cards are already available or capable of doing 25 gig. So it's a simple step for an operator to introduce this technology. And the ecosystem has expanded. There are a lot of ONT suppliers out there who are providing 25 gig, and we do have 2 interop events already from an industry level to prove interoperability. There's a last case or trend that I would like to point out. So if you think about enterprise and you think about in-campus enterprise, I also believe there is a major shift going to happen from copper to fiber. So today, we are at the point in time where enterprises are moving from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6 to Wi-Fi 7. And typically this means they need to rip out the copper network because, okay, it doesn't meet the speed, and they need to change the switches. This is exactly the switchover point which would justify a move towards what we call optical LAN. So you go from a copper-based approach towards a fiber-based approach. And the beauty of this is obviously it is greener, it uses less power, it is much more a dense solution, so you need less IT room, you need less space. The cabling is much more granular, so it's like a hair instead of a real copper bundle. And you only need to do it once because, okay, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, you have Wi-Fi 8. You don't need to redo it. This is much more future safe. So I do believe that fiber is a game changer for a LAN network because it's faster, it's greener, and it's going to be more cost effective. And it's a solution that we rolled out already to more than 700 enterprises. So if I summarize, I mean, the journey for fiber ahead is really, really exciting. And with all those different technologies, the next generation technologies that we are introducing, I do believe that fiber broadband will play a very, very significant role in the telecom industry, and it will be stronger than ever.
Well, that's a great summary too, because it's interesting how many of these future capabilities are, first of all, right around the corner, but second of all, kind of overlap and make it so that fiber really does seem like the only way out, you know, when you're talking about AI-enabled automation, but also having a nod toward, you know, the environment and greener networks and low latency applications on top of that, and future-proofing it for examples like you mentioned, like the enterprise campus LAN. It's, yeah, it really does point in one direction. So fiber definitely has a bright future for those applications. And you've given us plenty to think about. Thanks so much for your time today, Geert. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Thank you, Phil.
And great. And folks, if you're hearing this podcast series for the first time, please do go out and check out our past episodes on lightreading.com, and be sure to check the show notes for links from Nokia, our sponsor. And you can, of course, go to nokia.com and start from the top if you want to learn more about what they're doing in fiber broadband. Thanks so much for listening.